back and welcome back to Isabel. Do you remember what happened in 2016 is?
What happened in 2016? What, you mean the small matter of the referendum?
Yeah, do you remember that? And then do you remember that in theory we should have left the EU?
Yeah, and what, stop the free movement of people?
Right.
Is that what
Yeah, some people just didn't really get the memo, it seems. Apparently Sadiq Khan is agitating for bringing back an element of free movement. The Lib Dems are saying that the youth mobility scheme needs to come back. And whilst Number 10 has, it's worth pointing out, denied that such a plan is not being considered, there's a lot of chatter going around that elements of the Labour Party, at the very least, would like to see the free movement of EU citizens aged under 30 to come and live and work in the UK for 3 years. I mean, clearly, they just don't really care what most of the population voted for. But we're going to do this one quite quickly. As I said, I've messed up my ad break times. But interestingly, so I'm sort of moving my position on this ever so slightly, ever so slightly. If it was total free movement, absolutely not. If people prove that they've got a job, I feel slightly differently, because what we have done, I mean, actually, businesses are the ones to blame. They need to just hire British people. They need to make sure that British people are getting the jobs, and we need a Brits first attitude towards this stuff. But it does seem to me, especially when you go around London and the service industry, where we once had checks and polls and all the rest of it, working in restaurants and coffee shops and hotels, they've all gone home. And what we've now done is replaced them with a lot of very cheap labour from the developing world.
So I might surprise you on this one and say I'm actually really up for what's being proposed, or at least floated here, a kind of mutual scheme where young people from this country, I think it was 18s to 30s, isn't it? Something like that. Can spend up to 3 years in an EU member state working or studying, whatever, and vice versa. I'm not averse to that. I've never been anti that kind of mobility. You know, I love the idea that young people from all over Europe should get to be able to immerse themselves in the culture of a different country, learn the language, you know, do a job or study something. What is wrong with that? I'm completely positive about it.
It's quite funny because you and I have a similar take on this, actually. I mean, I think there's got to come with heavy conditions.
Yeah, of course, heavy conditions, which means it's limited. 3 years is really generous, and I assume it's 3 years to work around the standard degree course. But I think it's an absolutely fine idea, but it has to be coupled with a massive, and I mean massive, reduction in legal immigration as well as illegal immigration to the UK. We can't have this on top of the complete catastrophe we've got at the moment of effectively a total free-for-all on our borders.
Yeah, no, do you know what? I think you and I are exactly in the same place on this one, in terms of if people want to come and work, if they want to work, so they can prove they've got a job, and for the duration of the period they've got that job, they can be in the UK, then great. I've got no problem with that. I never have. And when you have people who are under 30 doing this tends to be service industry jobs by and large. And I don't have too much of a concern about that, although I do still think there needs to be, if a British person applies for that job, they should get priority, because at the end of the day, we need to make sure our own people are employed before we let other people come and take those jobs. But I mean, it's funny, isn't it? It's when you know, I'm a huge Brexiteer because I think this country should be able to decide things for itself. The problem I do have with this, of course, is when you start going down the rabbit hole with the EU, they don't like conditionality. They don't like, well, you've got to have a job. They go down the route of absolutism and, well, they can't stop at the age of 30, or it's got to be anybody can come here, and they need to have all the benefits straight away, and they've got to be treated just like equal citizens. You know, you give them an inch, they always want to take a mile, or you give them a centimetre, they want to take a kilometre.
Yeah, that's a real problem. I mean, when you say, you mentioned conditionality, I mean, it's there would have to be complete red lines, you know, so no benefits. You know, that just can't be a thing. You don't go to someone else's country and expect states to support you. That's not what this scheme would be about. But, you know, I think a lot of Brexiteers would support this scheme, because Brexiteers, it may surprise those on the other side of the argument, no, they're not anti-immigration per se. They want the right kind of immigration. And in any case, that's a temporary situation. Those people would be welcomed here for a fixed and limited period. The issue is, would they ever go home? And frankly, the performance of our borders officials and the whole system for monitoring who comes in and out doesn't really inspire confidence
I mean, in a way, what is a benefit of Brexit is we are able now, from a position of autonomy, to turn around and say this is the scheme that we would like, you know, that it would have to be visa-based, and at a certain point you do have to go home. Whereas if we were still in the EU, we wouldn't have that privilege. Isabel, great to be discussing that with you.